Well, hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Business Growth Mastery Show, where we showcase 6, 7 and 8-figure entrepreneurs, business owners, subject expert masters, and actually those who are thought leaders. So the idea is that they will share their challenges and as well their successes so that you can emulate that success in your business as well. I'm absolutely delighted to have with us Andy Harrington today, and Andy is the author of the Sunday Times Best Passion to Profit, how to make big money from who you are and what you do today, and what you know rather, as well as the founder of the Public Speaking Academy, which we'll hear a little bit more about in a moment. Andy has very kindly agreed to share his journey with us, how he got to where he got to, but just start us off, Andy, by telling us a little bit about what you did before you moved into self-employment, just to set the scene for the audience.
Well, firstly, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me on to talk to your audience. So before I started as an entrepreneur, many things. I started out working as stacking shelves in the supermarket, moved on to becoming on the fresh fish counter. And my business really, my career changed really when I found selling. I was attracted to selling, and in the early days was selling mobile phones and photocopiers and fax machines, when fax machines were thermal paper. If you left them out, they went black. And mobile phones when they were pretty big compared to what they are today. And then I joined Churchill Insurance, and I was on the phone selling insurance. And then I ultimately started a recruitment company that I borrowed £10,000 from the Abbey National for. And told them I was going to buy a car with the money, because I noticed they didn't lend me any money when I told them I was going to build a business with the money, but they were quite happy to lend me money to buy a depreciating asset. And yeah, within 5 years, we'd managed to generate £21 million in the 5 years we had it. I then sold that business and then started a training business.
Okay.
Because I was inspired to do that.
Okay, so what were the challenges of developing that very first business from your point of view, apart from the money that you obviously found by taking a slightly different route to the conventional route? What were the key challenges at the start of your entrepreneurial journey?
As always, it's just sales on the board, isn't it? You know, in essence, it's about quickly making enough money to make this a venture that actually pays you enough money. So, it probably took us 3 months to make our first deal.
Right.
So there's often a lag time between, you starting it and your first validation that actually what you're doing works. And then obviously you probably did our next deal probably a week later or something. So, that's the initial thing is, when starting, having your own database and, contacts and all that kind of stuff. Because everyone starts out as unknown, don't they?
Absolutely.
In essence. And, quickly you've got to establish yourself, which means hard work, making the phone calls, whatever it's got to be done in the early days. Now, it's different today, obviously, because you've got, the ability to reach out to all these people one-to-many through social media channels. Back in the day, it was the old technology called a phone. So, yeah, in essence, it was that. Okay,
but you managed to make a success of that business pretty quickly. Just remind us of the stats that you've just shared earlier. You said you made, as you sold it, you made...
Yeah, so we done revenue of 21 million in the 5 years that we had it.
Which is pretty steep.
Yeah, it is. But it's a recruitment business, and it's based on a model where we place a consultant, let's say it's £700 per day. We pay him maybe 550 or her 550 pounds a day.
Yep.
So the majority of that income goes back to the consultant. So we're only making a 20% margin, obviously. So
okay, good. That's what I was trying to get at.
The numbers sound big, but and they are. And don't get me wrong, we made a nice, good lump of money, but revenue isn't sales or profit.
Precisely. That was exactly what I was trying to get to. Okay, so we sell the recruitment business. What came next?
I was inspired to begin a training business. To be honest, I'd had a couple of moments of training people when I worked for Churchill. I'd really enjoyed it, and I seemed to have some kind of knack for it, I suppose, albeit quite raw at the time. And it kind of, going to somebody else's seminar kind of recaptured that. thought in my head that maybe that's what I should do. The original company that I had, the first company, was a co-directing relationship with somebody else, a friend of mine as it happens. And we had different ideas about the direction we wanted to go in and the ethos and the culture of the organisation. And I think either of us could have led it. I just think in the end, two of us together, one wasn't needed. And I just decided one day that was going to be me that wasn't needed, and I was going to go and do something else.
So you exited that business. And just give us a timeline now. Where are we now in terms of...
2003.
Okay, good.
Actually, maybe 2002. Yeah, 2002.
Okay. What came next?
Yeah, so I started that training business, and it was really a personal development kind of business. At the time, I didn't have any strategy to teach. I really taught, I should say, mindset kind of stuff. Kind of borrowed for Tony Robbins and a few other people here and there. And at the time, there were people in the UK, in London at least, putting on free preview events for things like stock market investing and property. But that was pretty much it, and there was only a couple of people doing it, and no one was doing it for personal development. I thought, well, I wonder if I could make that business model of a preview event, followed by selling them into a public training for mindset. I wonder if that would work. And it did. It did work for a while. But the business model I had ultimately to fill those rooms ended up being quite costly. You know, we're pre-days of Facebook here and all those wonderful platforms that we have access to today. Back in the day, it was local newspapers, LBC radio, so very expensive blanket forms of marketing. And I was, because I had but I had a decent amount of money coming from the sale of the first business, it didn't seem to matter at the time, but, sometimes if you got money, it makes you lazy in your marketing efforts, and you spend money you shouldn't really be spending. So in the end, that business model wasn't really sustainable. So I had to actually let that business go and have a pause for a year while I kind of figured out, okay, well, I really want to do this, but I have to find a way of doing it. I must be charging more money because I'm not making enough money. Because again, the challenge with personal development, although all needed and wonderful, people only pay a certain amount of money for that, but they tend to pay more for a tangible result where they make more money.
And something that's tangible and quick often as well. Yeah,
of course, exactly. So I had to figure that piece out, plus I had to figure out a way of marketing that was less expensive and sustainable, which is what I came back with and what I do today.
Okay, so that leads us very nicely into your current business. You're passionate about ensuring people are using their talents through speaking. I've heard you many times say that. And your company, Jet Set Speaker, what led you to think speaking is the thing I want to hone in on?
Because ultimately, when I first began teaching, I couldn't teach public speaking because I hadn't done it yet.
Okay.
So over the years of, inspiring people through the personal development, I obviously figured out that actually the strategy here of speaking is working for me, this one-to-many. So I thought, okay, well, actually, could I do that? Could I offer people that? Because it was growing at that time that people wanted. It was more events were coming up. Because in the UK it was a little bit behind the United States, and it started. This whole event industry started to be have a momentum of its own. So I thought, well, could I teach that, and would people pay a good amount of money for that? And I started out exactly in the beginning, really just teaching a very small subset of what I teach today. It was really just more about presentation skills. But there wasn't anything in there about how to create a presentation, how to do stories, how to sell to an audience. None of that was there because I hadn't really figured that piece out yet.
Okay, so originally you didn't have the Public Speaking Academy that you have now, which, for those who don't know, is very much an incubator of world-class speakers, and actually where we are today.
True.
But when did you decide that this model could work? What were the pointers for you that this is a business model that I can expand on and I can make work really for my audience as well as myself as a business? What was the sort of...
Over time, it began to build its own momentum. You know, like with a lot of things, when you begin, you don't know, actually, if it's going to have any legs or longevity. If it does, though, the market will tell you that, and then you build a bit more momentum from that. So you just have to pay attention to what the market is saying based on the results that you're getting and really the results that you're getting for other people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they're getting the outcomes, then that's validation in itself that this is working. So let's now drill down into your areas of expertise. And I think from the sort of the outsider looking in, I think there are two key things, having read your book as well as being party to you, hearing you, that you have the speaker expertise, but you also have what you call world-class content. And I'd like to really understand from you what defines both those for our audience, really.
Well, it's a long answer. So, yeah, there are many things that make someone charismatic and someone that can hold an audience and present in a way that means that everyone is hanging on every word. But if I was trying to distill it down to some smaller things that we could talk about, probably one of the most important things would be presence. We call it a presentation for a reason. The person has to be present. Most speakers aren't present. They're often in their own head thinking about their own content. When language is indeed an unconscious skill. As soon as you start thinking about what you should be saying versus being in the moment and saying it, you are one step removed from real life. And you'll look unnatural and sound unnatural. So the key is presence, which means that your content has to be organized in such a way that it doesn't require you to write it down. It doesn't require you to need, you know, a zillion bullet points with loads of sentences or some kind of cue card or script. It's something that just flows naturally through you. And when I say through you, I mean that it comes through you. Now, don't misunderstand. I don't mean that means the person presenting is going to be, you know, randomly going off on tangents. No, you need a system that stays on time, on topic, and on task, but still allows freedom of expression such that the content that you're delivering is not chunked down at the level of words. It's chunked in a bigger way than that. But as soon as you start trying to remember words on a page, you're screwed. And so you've got to be present. So I teach how to be present and for the message to come through you without the requirement of having to write it all out. Okay,
so I guess people listening to this for the first time might be quite anxious at that thought that, you know, this is not the way we are traditionally taught how to do presentations. There'd be lots of slides, lots of notes to ourselves that we would hold up and speak. Can you give an example? Can you just give them a small example of what you mean by through you?
Yeah, well, firstly, if they feel anxious about it because it's not the way they've been taught, then I would counter that and say, well, that's the reason why you're feeling anxious. Because you've been taught to do it the completely wrong way. Because there is no way any human is going to remember an extraordinary amount of content if you're going to present for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or, you know, a whole day workshop. You're not going to remember everything that you wrote down. Even actors who are masters of this craft of remembering the script and the words have to break it up into scenes such that they dedicate. And normally once they've done one scene, they can't remember it because their brain then thinks about the next scene. And they remember that. So anyone who's anxious is normally anxious because they're trying to come up here and do something that's unnatural. It needs to sound conversational. Now, this is a good example, the one we're in now. Okay. Because you are asking me a series of questions and I have not written down the answers.
No. Nor do you know what I'm going to be asking specifically.
That is correct. And the point about that is I don't actually need to know what you're going to ask me. and I don't need to know all the answers being written down. Why? Because the content is already here.
Yeah.
And what happens is, when you, hero, ask me the question, it triggers my answer. In the same way that if you typed into Google a question, Google goes away and finds the best references. When you ask me a question, my mind immediately thinks of the right references. That is anecdotal stories, examples, 1, 2, 3 points of reference, because that content as an expert is in me anyway. So that you don't ever need, as a presenter, to remember your answers. Actually, you just need to know the style of questions that will trigger those answers. See, I'm not feeling stressed or nervous about you interviewing me here, because I know that this is conversational. And actually, very few people are nervous about a regular, ordinary, everyday conversation.
True.
And when you get on stage, of course, the questioner is not there. It's just you. But here's what happens. You really are the interviewer and the interviewee when you're presenting. And that's good, because when you ask a question of the audience, which is rhetorical, which means you're going to answer it yourself, what it does is it breaks the monologue up of a lecture-based conversation or a lecture-based presentation into what sounds like a conversation. And then people in the audience settle down. They don't zone out, because questions break trance and content induces trance. So what I mean by that is, if you're just going statement, 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 you'll put people into a trance. However, questions make it conversational, and that is something that keeps the presentation ebbing and flowing in such a way that it's easy to listen to, but more importantly, it's easy for you to remember. So here's what you do. You make a statement or two about something that you want to teach or talk about or believe, and then you think to yourself, now given what I've just said, if this was me talking to somebody else, one person, I wonder what question they would ask me next based on what I've just said, in order to better fully understand what I've just said. So you might make a statement, and then you go, well, you might say, okay, so what I believe is X is really important. X is vital. Now, why do I say that X is vital? There's your question. And immediately my head thinks about why is X vital, and I'm going to find that answer. And when I say that answer, it might then throw up another question that the audience might ask about what I've said as that answer. And what that does is it means your content is well formed, and it's natural and conversational, and it means that your content will flow through you.
Got it.
And actually, sometimes the answers to the question that you give, that you ask rhetorically on stage, sometimes is an answer you've never given before.
Okay.
Because you find a moment of inspiration, because you're in a different state, it's a different moment in time. You've got different references that you built up over the last few weeks that suddenly you call upon as an example or a story. And there's a moment where you think, wow, that's just magical. And that also becomes part of a store of possible answers in the future again. So it means your content is nearly always similar each time, but it stays fresh and it evolves.
And you're just building into that toolbox that you've created for yourself.
Correct. And the audience really feel like this presentation's a here and now for them, not some pre-planned, canned presentation that's for anyone.
Yeah. So the questions are not just helping you, but they're actually helping to stimulate the audience as well at the same time.
Correct.
Okay. So just say a quick few words on the world-class content elements of your system, because that's a vital aspect of your system as well. So if we were to ask you for sort of the 3 key things that were really important within that content.
In essence, every presentation at its heart should have some kind of central framework to it, a model, a blueprint. So your talk presentation is designed to help fill a gap, in essence, between where your audience is right now and where they prefer to be. The idea is they're meant to implement your advice in such a way that it moves them in the direction of what they want and away from what they don't want, to solve a challenge or problem they have. But if your content is too loose and it's just to hold a random set of ideas and thoughts or files, shall we say, then the chances of them implementing or following this advice are less. So you need to come up with your own recipe, your own methodology, if you like, of how they get from where they are to where they want to be. So that should be there. And then around that needs to be some stories. One of them should be your story of why you do what you do and how you got to be doing it. Mm-hmm. That's a powerful story that builds trust. And then we build other anecdotal stories around the content as well. And then the other key factor that goes into the main body of the presentation, other than the natural teaching of those points in the framework itself, is you need to think about, okay, what are the beliefs of my audience that currently are keeping them stuck where they are, such that you don't just teach people, you also transform people as well. So if you know your audience well, you should know the typical beliefs that this audience has that you think are false beliefs, mm-hmm. but when they believe that they're true, they act upon them in such a way that it keeps them, slowed down or stopped or frustrated or whatever it might be. And what you've got to do is create content that raises that belief, challenges that belief, provides counter evidence to that belief, mm-hmm. and therefore builds a different antithesis of that belief. Because if you can get people to, at least for one moment, put aside some of the beliefs they have about themselves, business, money, time, whatever, and we can give them a new belief that's different. If they operate from a new set of beliefs as a result of your talk, their lives, their results, their business will change, because beliefs drive thinking, thinking drives emotion, emotion drives decision, decision drives action, and action drives results. Now, most teachers just teach new actions, the things to do better, which is why most business trainings suck. Because most business meetings and trainings, they'll talk about what needs to be done and then it doesn't get implemented.
Absolutely.
And the reason it's not implemented is because the people implementing it have a set of beliefs that mean they don't think it will work, or they think it's too hard, or that they're not good enough. Mm-hmm. And so they tend to procrastinate and wait, and at the user level, let's say, don't implement it. And that isn't because the steps don't work, it's because the people haven't got the belief structure that means they fully buy into the idea to make it work. And so every great presentation has to include a framework, some stories, and how to change their beliefs around it as well. And if you do that well, you'll be an influencer for sure.
Okay, let's bust the biggest myth around this, which is I'm just too nervous or don't have the confidence to speak on a live stage.
People speak in public all the time. Mm-hmm. When you have an audience, okay, let's just pick a number, 100 people. Mm-hmm. The mistake that people make is that if you look out at that audience, you will see 100 people. If you spray your content around all over those 100 people, it can feel daunting because there are 100 of them and only one of you. And you look out and think, well, their army's a bit bigger than mine. And you're worried that, therefore there's not enough of you. But actually, the way to present is not to talk to everyone at the same time. What you do when you stand on stage is you pick out one individual out of 100, you stare directly at that one person, and you have an intimate conversation with that one person for about 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. Now, that's an arbitrary number, that 10 seconds, but the real truth is you speak to them until you reach a comma or a full stop, meaning you reach a natural pause, and then you move on and look at somebody else in the audience. So now we've got 2 people you've spoken to in the audience. And then you repeat that process until you've spoken individually to and looked directly at 100 people. And then you carry on with the performance thereafter, continuing that. So you look at somebody individually, one-to-one, right down the barrels of them looking at them, probably 3 or 4 times in the presentation. And when you do, they will feel very significant. You create a bond and a connection. So the way I do it is to not think about having to present to 10,000 people. I'm only having a chat to one person at a time. I change it and make it intimate. I want somebody in the audience to feel a level of intimacy with me, even though there are many other people around.
Great.
Such that at the end of the presentation, they think to themselves, not, wow, that was a great presentation, but my gosh, it felt like he was talking to just me the entire time. So a feeling of intimacy in a large group, that's what you want to pull off. So there are techniques that can do this. There are others as well to do with, the pauses themselves. For example, being in peripheral vision, for example, is another one. But these are other techniques that assist the process. But much of the time, it's also just stage time.
Okay.
If you have a belief that says I can't, then you're right. And if you don't have any counter evidence to suggest otherwise, you get to keep your shit belief. So in the end, people will say, well, I can't drive a car. Well, that's because you've never driven a car. But most people have figured out how to drive a car. Yeah. Because it became a must for them. So really, this is a question of priority rather than it's a question of belief.
Okay. So in terms of going back to you, what's the most surprising thing that you've learnt on your journey to date?
I suppose that the common denominator in all of us is loss. That when we tend to think sometimes that we are one of the only people that have made mistakes, that we've missed out. We know intrinsically, I suppose, that isn't true. But when you really listen to a lot of other people's stories, you find out that actually we're all battling with the same things. We're all, in real terms, doing what we do because either we want to experience love or what we're doing is a substitute for love. So the surprising thing that I learned along the way is that the currency of business is love.
That's interesting.
And not money. And that was a surprise to me. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone believes that. It's just that business is about service. It's about serving. The whole world works because we help each other. Now, if people don't help each other and bring their unique talent, skills, abilities to the workforce, the whole of society collapses. And so everything really is love. And once you get that, when your service that you deliver to people comes from a place of love, it comes truly from a place of service and giving, then a strange thing happens. You make loads of money, but you don't need to. You become more attractive in every sense of the word. And when you are vibrating in that vibration of love, there is a ease and a magic and eloquence that comes that almost you never want to leave you. And on stage is a great place for that to happen, because when it happens one to many rather than service one to one, that feeling that you generate inside is so highly magnified that it almost becomes addictive. That you become almost addicted to serving and making that difference. Now, I don't know if it is a healthy thing or not, but if I'm going to get addicted to something,
it might as well be that.
I would prefer it to be that
Absolutely.
than the addiction of something else that is a coping mechanism because I have an absence of love.
Brilliant. Okay, so as we near the end, I have two key takeaways that I just want to remind the audience about. The first one is that in order to have a successful presentation or a speaking event, from your point of view, was having the right framework, stories, and you're there to change a belief, I believe.
Correct.
Yes?
100%, yes.
And the second one was the one that worries many, many people, which is about, I don't have the confidence to stand up and talk to people out in a crowd in a live event. And if I've heard you right, it was very much about speaking to that one person in the crowd rather than feeling that you're having to speak to all.
That's right. And then moving that one person around. So,
Precisely.
Not staring at just that one person for the entire
staring them to death. No, absolutely not.
But that can be done sometimes when you've got like a favourite in the audience who's nodding at you.
Yeah.
But you've got to move around that one person so you pick everybody up, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so Andy has very kindly agreed to let us have the audio version of his book,
okay.
Which, just to remind you, is a Sunday Times bestseller, Passion into Profit, and we are going to post the link on the show notes
Sure.
so that everyone can get their hands on this wonderful book,
yeah.
which tells them not only your story, but the system that we've been exploring today
Sure.
as well.
Yeah.
It just leaves me to say a huge, huge thank you for being part of this show, for sharing so candidly your story and your tips and techniques. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.